It all began in 1600, when Portuguese Catholic traders made enormous profits by trading with Japan. They kept the location a secret because they didn't want other European nations to discover where Japan was. Meanwhile, in Japan, the great emperor had died, and his heir was still too young to rule. Because of that, 5 powerful lords became locked in a struggle for power. But in the end, only one of them would rise to rule the country with absolute authority. This story focuses on a pilot and navigator named John Blackthorne, a skilled sailor who dreamed of discovering the location of Japan. At that time, the weather was terrible. Even so, John held firmly to a Spanish navigation book that claimed that if they passed through the Strait of Magellan, they would eventually reach Japan. He wanted to find the island and return to Holland as a hero, having discovered a new strategic trade route. Unfortunately, his crewmates no longer believed in him. To them, the journey was impossible, especially since they only had one ship left and they didn't want to die for nothing. In the middle of his despair, John stepped out onto the deck of the ship. He stared into the distance and wondered if he would ever truly find the islands of Japan. Elsewhere, a fisherman was praying on the shore. As he raised his cross, he suddenly heard a loud, thunderous boom coming from the thick, frightening fog. Moments later, a massive ship appeared and ran aground on the coast of Japan. The sudden arrival of the ship caused the local forces to rush to the scene. When no one came out, they decided to storm the vessel. Carefully, they searched for whoever had dared to dock in their waters. When the commander entered the ship, he found a man lying weak and barely conscious. He assumed the man was starving. Suddenly, another man woke up and tried to escape, but he failed. The Japanese soldiers were confused because these men did not look like invaders. Meanwhile, one of the most powerful lords in Japan, Lord Toranaga, was waiting for news from the other regions. With the help of a messenger bird, he learned that he had been summoned to meet them. With his horse and his troops, Lord Toranaga immediately set out for Osaka Castle. When he arrived, Lord Hishido, who controlled Osaka, ordered him to remain in isolation. From a distance, it was clear that the other regions disliked Toranaga. After a long discussion, they finally held a meeting, with Toranaga standing alone in the center before the others. Hishido announced that they were concerned about Toranaga's movements, suspecting that he intended to challenge the council. As evidence, they pointed to the expansion of Toranaga's territories. Not only that, Toranaga also had Lady Ochiba, the mother of Taiko's heir, under his protection. However, Toranaga firmly rejected their accusations. He stated that according to Taiko's mandate, the lands were supposed to be divided fairly. Unfortunately, the other 4 regions had already signed an agreement, and Toranaga realized that he was being framed. To avoid war, Toranaga chose to yield. This decision shamed his retainers, and one of them asked permission to commit seppuku to atone for the disgrace. Fortunately, Toranaga stopped him. He apologized to Ishido, and Ishido granted him 1 week to remove Lady Ochiba from Toranaga's domain. After the meeting, Toranaga spoke with his advisor, Sugiyama. Sugiyama warned him to be careful because he believed Ishido and the others would kill him as soon as Lady Ochiba left. Calmly, Toranaga began to think of another strategy. He knew that if he fought against the 4 other lords at once, he would lose. So he made his first move by ordering Sugiyama to return to their domain, while he himself stayed behind to look for an opportunity. In another region, a local commander ordered the fishermen to stay inside their homes because his uncle, Yabushige, was about to inspect the village. Elsewhere, John Blackthorne and the remaining crew were being held prisoner in a hut. On one hand, they feared they would be killed, but on the other hand, John was secretly happy because he believed he had finally reached Japan, the land that the Portuguese had hidden for so many years. He wanted to cooperate with the locals and open trade, so he could bring great wealth back to his homeland. When Lord Yabushige arrived, but because of the language barrier, a misunderstanding occurred, and John, as the navigator, tried to speak. His movements were stopped by his crewmates, who feared he would be killed if he went forward. And because the Japanese soldiers were losing patience, 2 of them decided to step down and bring one of the prisoners up by force. When the soldiers came down, the Dutch crew quickly captured them and took them hostage so John could try to negotiate. Because it was an uneven fight, the Japanese soldiers were humiliated by being splashed with pig's blood, and John was brought up. After John finally met the commander, he tried to negotiate by claiming that he was the owner of a Dutch trading ship that had been stranded for 2 months. He only wanted his ship and his crew to be returned safely. Because the commander did not understand John's language, he ordered one of the fishermen to tell him to behave properly. Fortunately, the fisherman could speak English. He warned John to mind his manners in Japan, but John stubbornly insisted on negotiating, which only angered the commander. In response, the commander urinated on him and had him paraded back before Lord Yabushige. During the march, some villagers asked whether John was a Christian. The soldiers did not answer. Then one villager tried to make a Christian sign, but instead of helping, that action cost him his life, as one of the soldiers beheaded him from behind. Eventually, John was brought before Yabushige, the Lord of Izu. A Portuguese priest was summoned to translate John's words so they could learn who he really was. John kept insisting that he was a Dutch trader who only wanted the freedom to return to his homeland. But the priest deliberately twisted his words, telling Yabushige that John was a dangerous pirate who wanted to destroy the peaceful Portuguese trade system. The priest demanded that John be executed. John realized the priest was trying to turn everyone against him. In anger, he grabbed the cross and smashed it right in front of the priest. Yabushige, unwilling to make a hasty decision, only ordered the priest to choose another crewman to be executed instead. As for John, he was ordered to be taken away and bathed. The scene then shifts to Toranaga, who is seen playing with the young heir Yaichio. Toranaga is teased for being too old to play properly. He defends himself by saying that when he was a child, he never had the chance to play like this because he was sold to the enemy. Soon, Yaichio's attendant calls him to prepare for his writing lessons, which Toranaga believes are essential for a future ruler. After Yaichio is taken away, Toranaga talks with the woman about the future of the realm. He wonders how Ishido managed to convince the other regents to demand that Lady Ochiba return to Osaka. Toranaga suspects that Ishido must have promised them land. Meanwhile, the Portuguese priest's wish is granted. One of John's crewmen is taken from the hut and thrown into a cauldron filled with boiling water. His screams terrify the others, who fear they will suffer the same fate. Yabushige seems to enjoy the process, listening to the screams and the sound of the boiling water. But the moment does not last long, because his men have prepared a courtesan for him. A beautiful woman in a red dress steps forward and says she is ready to serve her lord and will be happy if she can satisfy him. When Yabushige's subordinate is supposed to leave, he instead freezes in place. The courtesan slowly approaches him, guiding his hands and beginning to undress. Yabushige, clearly amused, stops writing and watches as the courtesan begins to give his man worldly pleasure. The next morning, John wakes up naked, having been bathed and shaved. Food and drink have been prepared in front of him, and he immediately eats. But he is confused. Where is he? And why is he there? Soon 2 women appear and help dress him so he can go out and meet Lord Yabushige. While Yabushige and the commander are talking about Toranaga's growing power, a messenger suddenly arrives, reporting that a ship has just appeared offshore. They immediately head to the coast to see who has arrived. To their surprise, it turns out to be an envoy of Lord Toranaga. Yabushige and his men bow to Hiromatsu. Hiromatsu explains that he has come to order Yabushige to go to Edo on Toranaga's command. However, Yabushige claims that he is busy dealing with the strange ship that arrived out of nowhere. Without hesitation, Hiromatsu takes control of the ship and its cargo: 500 guns, 20 cannons, and several chests of silver, all for Lord Toranaga. While Hiromatsu's men are seizing the cargo, it is decided that John will be sent to Osaka. Fortunately, a man named Rodriguez steps forward and offers to take responsibility for him. Because Rodriguez can speak English, the Japanese immediately entrust John to him. John, still confused, asks Rodriguez what will happen to his crew. Rodriguez replies that they will be spared as long as they behave. John is then taken aboard Rodriguez's ship. Rodriguez is a Spanish sailor. Using his sharp navigator's instincts, John warns Rodriguez that before sunset, a storm will strike. Rodriguez does not believe him at first, but not long after, John's prediction comes true. A massive storm appears, the waves become violent, and the ship is thrown into chaos. Everyone panics, except John, who orders Rodriguez to steer straight into the waves. Because Rodriguez is not a strong swimmer, he decides to cut the rope binding John's hands and let John handle the situation. John quickly rushes onto the deck and orders the crew to keep rowing, but when he returns, he sees that Rodriguez has been swept away by the waves and is nowhere to be found. Thanks to John's guidance, the ship finally makes it to shore safely. He immediately tries to search for Rodriguez, even though Lord Hiramatsu initially opposes him. However, Yabushiga defends John, saying that he will accompany him to look for Rodriguez. When John is about to climb down the cliff, Yabushiga suddenly stops him. He does not want John to risk his life, so John challenges Yabushiga to go down and save Rodriguez himself. Yabushiga accepts the challenge. Carefully, he climbs down the cliff, but death nearly claims him when he slips and falls from a great height. After managing to save himself, he tries to reach Rodriguez and pull him up. Again and again, the waves crash into him, and Yabushiga begins to lose hope. In despair, he prepares to commit seppuku, raising his katana toward his own body. But just in time, Yabushige's men arrive and pull him back up to safety. After this incident, John officially swears his loyalty to Yabushige. That night, Toranaga speaks with the official guardian of the young heir. He talks about his growing anxiety, fearing that Ishido and the others will soon remove him from power. Because Toranaga knows that the guardian can speak Portuguese, he asks him to serve as an interpreter for the foreign barbarian who has been captured by his men. The next day, after Rodriguez regains consciousness, John visits him and tells him about the moment when Yabushige tried to kill himself, believing he would not survive the incident. John is shocked, but Rodriguez explains that the Japanese have a culture of honor and shame. They would rather kill themselves than be killed on the battlefield. Not long after, Rodriguez suddenly takes out several books that he found on John's ship. He plans to give them to the Portuguese. John becomes furious and tries to strike him, but Rodriguez is armed with a pistol. He knows that if those books fall back into Portuguese hands, he will be executed. John insists that he will not die in this land. Out of a strange sense of generosity, Rodriguez invites John to see the city of Osaka, asking whether John still thinks Europe alone deserves to be called the center of civilization. When John finally sees Osaka, he is stunned by how advanced the city is. Rodriguez also says that perhaps this is John's destiny, to come to Japan and become the first European in history to truly conquer it. In the end, John kneels before the great Lord Toranaga in Osaka Castle. The recent events cause the story to rewind to 1 year earlier in Osaka, to the moment when Taiko was facing his death. At that time, all the great lords and their retainers gathered to hear Taiko's final words. Taiko spoke with his wife and with Yaichio, who was still far too young to rule the country. When Taiko grew tired, he ordered everyone to leave him alone. As Toranaga was about to depart, a priest approached, insisting that Taiko must undergo the sacrament so his soul could be preserved in the kingdom of heaven. This immediately met resistance from the women, who believed the ritual was nothing more than the priest's fantasy. Suddenly, Taiko asked Toranaga to stay behind and speak with him in private. They talked about their past, laughing about how they used to drink sake together and even urinate side by side. Taiko joked that if they had managed to conquer Korea back then, he would not hesitate to grant Toranaga the title of Shogun, and perhaps even give him his daughter, Ochiba. With great humility, Toranaga said he was not worthy of such a beautiful woman as Ochiba. Then Taiko spoke of his true wish. He wanted Toranaga to govern the country until Yaichio was old enough to rule. But once again, Toranaga refused. He knew that if he ruled alone, many enemies would try to kill him, kidnap Yaichio, and overthrow Taiko's legacy. Because Taiko was pleased with Toranaga's way of thinking, He handed him a letter. Inside was the decree to form a council of regents, consisting of Ishido, Kiyama, Ono, Sugiyama, and Toranaga. They would each rule parts of the realm until Yaichio turned 16. Toranaga accepted this mandate and kept it until the end of Taiko's life. That decree remained the foundation of the realm until Ishido began trying to overthrow Toranaga through cunning schemes. Back in the present, the foreign barbarian John is finally brought before the great Lord Toranaga for the first time. But before that, we see how the Portuguese priests react to John's presence. Rodriguez brings them the books he found on John's ship and tells them that John is a filthy rebel who fears neither God nor authority. The priests worry that John's presence will destroy European influence in Japan. By coincidence, Father Tsuji is assigned to be the interpreter between John and Toranaga that very day. The head priest orders him to make sure that John does not become a problem for them. Tsuji quickly goes to the castle and meets Yaichio before facing Toranaga. There he politely introduces himself. But John does not trust Tsuji's translations at all. He believes Tsuji will twist his words and lie to Toranaga, even though Tsuji actually translates faithfully. The conversation between John and Toranaga quickly becomes tense. Toranaga asks why John's nation and Tsuji's nation are enemies. John answers that his country, England, located thousands of miles from Japan, refuses to become Catholic. Then Toranaga asks if being a Protestant also makes John a pirate. John denies it. He insists that he is a merchant. As for the cannons, he explains that they were a gift from his Dutch patron, only meant for defense in case enemies tried to stop them. Instead of calming Toranaga, John's words only provoke him. Toranaga says that he could easily become John's enemy and erase him in an instant. John backs down. He knows he would lose if he challenged Toranaga. Strong Ishido has arrived. Ishido warns Toranaga not to make any sudden moves before the time of his removal comes. He also mocks John, calling him a filthy dog. To avoid making Ishido suspicious, Toranaga decides to imprison John for the time being. John protests, saying that he is a guest, not a prisoner, but there is nothing he can do. That night, strong Lady Mariko, the only member of the court who can speak Portuguese, is summoned by Toranaga. He wants to discuss what happened earlier that day. Mariko says that Tsuji's translation can be trusted, because he did translate John's words correctly. However, she warns Toranaga to be cautious, because she has a strong instinct that John is a dangerous man. The discussion between strong Hiramatsu, Mariko, and Toranaga is actually about how to prevent Toranaga from being overthrown. Their spies report that John's presence is making the Christians nervous. That means John could become a useful piece on the board. Mariko understands immediately. Toranaga cannot be removed unless all the regents approve it. So they must use John's existence to divide Ishido's faction and the Christian lords. In the prison, John begins to believe that his life will end there. Then suddenly, a middle-aged man appears and rescues him. He calls himself a servant of God, saying that he has come to save John from the death that awaits him. The old man tells John that Toranaga is now a prisoner of the court, isolated by his rivals in the Council of Regents. There is Sugiyama, descendant of the richest samurai family in Japan, Ono, a feared warrior who suffers from leprosy, and Kiyama, a Christian lord who follows nothing but his own greed. All of them are being controlled by Ishido, who is preparing to sentence Toranaga to death in the near future. The next morning, Ishido meets with the other regents. He announces that the heir of Edo has been born that very morning, and that the mother of the heir has already left Osaka Castle, which means the time has come to officially approve Toranaga's removal. However, Ishido's plan is met with resistance when Sugiyama brings up the existence of John, the barbarian who could shake all of Japan. Even though Ishido has met him before, he is shocked to learn that John is known as a skilled killer of Christians in several countries. Even Ono agrees that John should be executed first, before they begin the vote to remove Toranaga. Back in the prison, the old man tells John more about Toranaga's bloodline. He explains that Toranaga's ancestor was once the most respected man in Japan, because he held the title of Shogun. That is why no one ever truly knows what Toranaga is thinking or planning. The old man also says that he came to Japan in 1572, and that he saw with his own eyes how deceitful the Portuguese were. They spread their influence through profitable trade, but in truth, they were trying to take control of the country. They even built a trading base in Macau, because they knew the Chinese deeply hated the Japanese. Hearing this, John realizes that the old man might not just be trying to save himself. He begins to see an opportunity to destroy Portuguese influence in Japan. The scene then shifts to Yabushige, who is standing and gazing at Osaka Castle. Not long after, Ishido arrives. His eyes are covered with a white cloth, and he is marched into the forest by the executioners. But unexpectedly, an old man blocks their path. It turns out to be a trap. Suddenly, bandits appear and slaughter all the executioners, except John. After they are all dead, it becomes clear that the mastermind behind this rescue is Yabushige. But he did not do this for Ishido. He did it for Toranaga. Yes, Toranaga is trying to save John from Ishido's execution order, because in return, he wants the information John possesses. Toranaga also brings Mariko to serve as John's interpreter. The first question Toranaga asks John is about England, its customs, and its government. John does not go into much detail. He only says that his queen is a wise woman, and that she would surely consider a friendship between England and Japan. Then Toranaga hands John a piece of bamboo, and asks him to draw a map of the world. Using his knowledge, John only shows the distance between Japan and England, and explains the route he took to reach Japan. He says that he traveled through the Strait of Magellan because he was afraid of passing through Macau, where the Portuguese had their base. Bluntly, John exposes the schemes between the Portuguese and the Christian lords. He reveals that the Portuguese secretly hired Japanese mercenaries, Ronin, to smuggle weapons during a rebellion against Tycho's rule. Not only that, he also reveals that 70 years ago, Portugal and Spain made an agreement to divide the undiscovered world between them, and one of those lands was Japan, which means the Portuguese presence in Japan is a disaster. Slowly but surely, Japan's government would be taken over by Portuguese-backed Christian lords. Because of this information, and because John swears that everything he said is true, Toranaga allows him to stay and rest in Osaka Castle for the night. After the meeting, Mariko escorts John to his room. Along the way, John keeps thanking her for translating his words properly. Mariko simply reminds him to speak only when asked, and to address her properly as Mariko-sama. John's actions truly make the Portuguese Christians panic, especially after Toranaga cancels the departure of the black ship that was carrying goods for the Portuguese. That night, while Toranaga and John are resting, chaos suddenly erupts. A woman appears and begins killing the servants. Everyone panics and rushes to find Toranaga, but Toranaga is not an ordinary man. He is clever and always reads the situation. When the assassin tries to stab him, Toranaga is already prepared. He slashes her throat. John rushes in to help, but the fight is already over. The woman dies by Toranaga's hand. When the guards finally arrive, Toranaga says that this was not Ishido's doing, because according to his instincts, the woman was not trying to kill him. She was trying to kill John Blackthorne. After the terrifying events of the previous night involving John and Toranaga, the story shifts to Yabushige, who is shown writing his final testament as if preparing to face his own death. After finishing his writing, Yabushige immediately goes to Toranaga's castle to hold a private discussion. It is clear that Toranaga is ready to question him about the information he has, especially about Amitabha. Yabushige explains that the Amitabha are assassins who have sworn themselves under a Buddhist oath. Then Toranaga bluntly admits that he already knows Ishido visited Yabushige's house. He only wants to know one thing: what did Ishido offer him? Yabushige confesses that Ishido offered him a seat on Toranaga's Council of Regents. But Yabushige refused, because he is far more interested in gaining Suruga province to expand his territory and wealth. In the end, because Toranaga wants Yabushige on his side, he offers him Suruga province on one condition: John and Lady Kiri must be taken to Yabushige's domain in Ajiro. Elsewhere, the captain of the black ship is seen arguing with the Portuguese priests. After Toranaga's decision to prevent their departure, they blame everything on John. The captain insists on leaving anyway, because the profits from their monopoly trade with China are too important to abandon. After leaving the priest's residence, the captain meets Rodriguez and orders him to kill John so their plans can proceed smoothly. Because of the wound he suffered the previous night, John's hand is treated by a doctor. Even though John does not trust the doctor at first, Mariko insists that he obey the doctor's instructions. The doctor, annoyed by John's behavior, says that John does not really need medicine. What he needs is the comfort of a woman. John is embarrassed by this, which makes Mariko joke that perhaps John prefers men. Not long after, Mariko's husband arrives and informs them that they will be leaving for Ajiro to seek refuge, with John under their protection. The scene then shifts to the princess, who has just received the ashes of her late husband and child. Hiramatsu tries to comfort her, saying that they died fighting for the realm. Hiramatsu also tells her that they must depart immediately to avoid assassination. Soon, preparations begin. The troops gather because the princess and Lady Kiri are about to be escorted out of Osaka. Just as Lady Kiri and the princess enter their palanquins, moments before departure, a guard suddenly reports that Ishido has arrived to inspect the palace. The departure is forced to stop. Ishido announces that the departure of important figures must be reported at least a day in advance. His men then begin inspecting every palanquin and every piece of cargo. Fortunately, Toranaga's escape plan still works perfectly, thanks to John, who notices and exposes Ishido's trick at the right moment. After that, Ishido finally orders his guards to escort the convoy out through the gate. And so, the journey continues. Along the road, John asks Mariko about the plan. Mariko explains that Toranaga is known as the master of deception. With his countless schemes, he always manages to outwit his enemies. But the journey is stopped again when the gate guards demand to inspect the convoy. This time, John steps forward and acts like a hero, blocking the guards from opening the palanquin. Using his Portuguese, John tells them to back off, claiming it is a matter of privacy, especially because there are women inside. But his attempt is rejected, and the guards beat him. Still, John's effort is not completely in vain. Suddenly, Ishido's escort shouts and orders the guards to let the convoy pass. At last, the group continues their journey to protect their lord, Toranaga. From morning until night, John stays by Mariko's side as his interpreter. They talk about their personal lives, especially Mariko's relationship with her husband, Buntaro. John also admits that he has a son and a baby daughter back home. But their journey is suddenly interrupted when an arrow strikes one of Ishido's guards. Everyone panics as more arrows rain down on them. They try to protect themselves from the sudden ambush. Because the lives of John and Toranaga are in danger, the soldiers quickly move to shield them. From a distance, the mastermind behind the attack is revealed. It is Kiyama. He does not care that some of Ishido's men are mixed in with Toranaga's forces. The one he wants dead is the engine, John. The battle cannot be avoided. Many soldiers fall on the battlefield, but Toranaga and his right-hand men manage to escape, thanks to Yabushige, who helps cut down the attackers. At last, Toranaga, Mariko, John, and the remaining soldiers manage to escape to the harbor. But it turns out the fishermen are John's allies, led by a man known as Captain Sama. The captain helps them board his ship. At the same time, the black ship is already sailing across Japanese waters. John tells Toranaga that the ship they are currently on cannot pass through the massive reefs. If they force it, the ship will sink. However, they can survive if they board the Portuguese black ship. Without hesitation, Toranaga orders his men to approach the black ship. From a distance, John shouts to Rodriguez telling him that he has brought Toranaga to speak with the general. Soon, the meeting takes place. Toranaga asks the general for help in destroying some of Ishido's and Kiyama's forces so he can pass safely through Osaka's waters. In return, the black ship will be allowed to leave. But the general feels that the offer is not enough. So Toranaga increases the offer, 10,000 in silver, plus future investments that will fully benefit the Portuguese. He also promises to build a Christian church in Edo, the territory he controls. Tsuji, acting as the translator, conveys the offer to the priest. However, it is clear that the priest only wants to take advantage of the situation, because he does not seriously agree to help Toranaga. Before Toranaga leaves the deck, Tsuji approaches him and hands him John's book, a book that contains records of John's past crimes. In the end, Toranaga's men are allowed to board the black ship, with one condition: only Japanese are permitted to go aboard. John is left behind on the captain's ship. With no other choice, John can only watch as Toranaga, Mariko, and the others sail away on the black ship. But this does not break John's spirit. He urges Captain Sama to push his crew to row harder. With the strength and determination of the Japanese sailors, John believes there is still hope to follow them by daring to cross the deadly reefs. A naval duel begins between Rodriguez and John. The general orders Rodriguez to trap and narrow the movement of John's ship. But John is no ordinary navigator. Using his skills, he manages to survive and escape death. This becomes good news for Toranaga, who is pleased to see John Blackthorne's determination. Furious that the barbarian survives, Ishido decides to leave the area. And because the captain's ship successfully passes through the massive reefs, Toranaga decides to return to that ship. The next morning, Ishido meets with Kiyama, Ono, and Sugiyama. They discuss why Ishido did not immediately execute John. Ishido believes Toranaga will soon die anyway, so he decides not to worry about John for now. Not long after, Hiromatsu arrives, carrying a message from Toranaga. The message contains Toranaga's apology and his letter of resignation from the Council of Regents, filled with words of personal regret. This move completely ruins Ishido's plan to remove Toranaga using the 4 votes of the council. Back on the ship, after successfully leaving Osaka, Toranaga orders his eldest son to return to Ejiro with Yabushige. He wants his son to rule there temporarily. Elsewhere, John and Mariko talk again. John confesses that he has never even seen his daughter's face because he left before she was born. Then Toranaga and his men approach them. Toranaga asks Mariko to translate his words as he thanks John for saving them all. He then shows John the book he received from Tsuji, the book containing evidence of John's crimes that could get him executed. But Toranaga says he knows it will take time to translate. So instead, he orders everyone to prepare for war. He wants John to command a regiment and to teach Yabushige and his son how to fight using ships. Not only that, Toranaga orders everyone to address John as Hatamoto, a very high and honorable title. Then Toranaga asks John to teach him how to dive. Without hesitation, John jumps straight into the water to demonstrate. Several times, Toranaga finally joins him, and then challenges John to a race to the nearest shore. The story then moves to the Izu region. There, Omi, the commander of the local forces, receives a message from Osaka, saying that Lord Toranaga will soon arrive in Izu. Since Toranaga's arrival is a great honor, Omi immediately orders all the soldiers and the villagers to prepare to welcome their lord. Meanwhile, out at sea, after John is officially appointed as Hatamoto, he is informed that he will be given a wife. Lady Mariko tries to persuade Lady Fuji to accept the role and serve him. At first, Fuji refuses. She says she is still mourning the death of her husband and her child. She would rather withdraw from the world and serve the country as a nun. However, since a Hatamoto is expected to have a wife, Mariko continues to persuade her, explaining that John will only need her companionship for 1 year. After long and difficult negotiations, Mariko reports to Lord Toranaga that Fuji agrees to stay with John for 6 months only, and even then, without marriage. On the ship, Yabushige is shocked when he hears that Toranaga has resigned from the Council of Regents. Toranaga clarifies his decision. He admits that he can no longer do much to defend his position. Now, his only concern is how to defeat Ishido. Although Yabushige protests and says that Toranaga's decision is no different from suicide, Toranaga replies that as long as there is no official execution order from the capital, he is still alive. Even while the ship is still far away, the thunderous cheers of the Izu soldiers can already be heard, shouting Toranaga's name and honoring him. When they finally land, Omi immediately presents sake and gathers all his troops to honor Lord Toranaga's arrival. Everyone cheers. Toranaga then gives a speech telling the samurai of Izu that Japan will soon be plunged into chaos. He asks them to protect the country from slander and deception, so that Taiko's legacy may be preserved. As a sign of respect, Toranaga bows deeply to the Izu samurai who welcome him. However, after the speech, Toranaga must leave Izu again due to urgent business. While he is away, his son Nagakado will lead the troops and learn English-style warfare from John. Omi also formally welcomes Lady Mariko, and for the first time, John and Omi are officially introduced to each other. After that, John suddenly goes to look for the fisherman named Miraji. He wants to ask about the fate of his crew, who are still being held in Izu. Because of the language barrier, a misunderstanding occurs until Mariko arrives to translate. She explains that John's crew has been moved to Edo for their safety, and if John needs his weapons, they will provide them to him whenever he requires them. John says that he actually wants his ship and his crew back. But Mariko tells him that everything he owns has now been taken over by Toranaga, according to the agreement between them. With no other choice, John is forced to accept it. Mariko explains that as a Hatamoto, John will be given a proper residence and a wife to accompany him. She introduces Uejiro as the gardener who will take care of his estate. When John sees all this luxury, he immediately refuses, saying that he doesn't deserve any of it. But Mariko tells him that this is what a Hatamoto is entitled to. He will even be paid 240 koku per year. In this episode, John truly cannot pursue his own plans anymore. All he can do is accept everything that Lord Toranaga gives him, including a beautiful companion like Fuji. That night, Yabushige, Omi, and Omi's deputy hold a meeting. They discuss who might be Toranaga's spy, the one who reported the discovery of John's ship. So far, Omi has not found the person. This makes Yabushige angry, because since Omi took over, he has shown no significant improvement. Then, the discussion shifts to their real plan, to survive by standing between Toranaga and Ishido. Omi even suggests hiding John's cannons and artillery until Toranaga is overthrown. That way, the weapons will no longer belong to Toranaga, but to Yabushige, who can later offer them to Ishido. So none of them will be accused of betraying the country. Yabushige's face shows that he is seriously considering this plan. Meanwhile, John is sitting alone in silence when Mariko approaches him. She tells him that Lady Fuji deserves to be treated much better. Fuji is a noblewoman who has just lost her husband and her son, both of whom were executed for insulting Ishido. John still does not understand why Fuji keeps following him. Mariko explains that it is simply Fuji's duty to accompany the Hatamoto wherever he goes. Mariko begins to tell him about the eightfold fence gate, about how Japanese people are taught from childhood to observe without listening and to understand without speaking. It is like hearing flowers fall or watching stones grow. The Japanese do this so they can feel safe and at peace even when they are alone. After saying that, Mariko leaves John and gives him the pistol he wanted. The next morning, before John begins teaching the Japanese troops modern warfare, Omi comes to his residence and demands that John hand over the weapon. Of course, John refuses. He is no longer a prisoner. John's refusal makes Omi furious, and he immediately orders his men to draw their swords. Not wanting to back down, John does the same. Mariko tries to stop the conflict, but then Fuji asks Mariko to tell John to give the weapon to her. In the end, John listens to his wife and hands the pistol to Fuji. However, Omi still insists on taking it. When he tries to seize it by force, Fuji suddenly points the gun at him. Omi freezes instantly. Seeing Fuji's courage, John is completely stunned by her. They soon leave for the training grounds, where Yabushige, Nagakado, and the war commanders are already waiting. They want John to teach them new battle tactics they have never seen before. But instead of starting with tactics, John tells them about the greatest war he has ever witnessed, when 60,000 Ottoman Muslims fought against 600 Christians. Because this happened 35 to 40 years ago, Mariko refuses to translate it. She wants John to talk only about what he himself experienced. John thinks for a moment, then changes his plan. He decides to teach them English naval warfare instead. He immediately begins a demonstration and orders his cannons to be prepared. At first, Yabushige does not believe the cannon will hit the target. But when John tells them to load the gunpowder, boom, the cannon fires and the shot hits the target perfectly. Everyone is left in awe. For days, John practices with them, teaching how to aim and fire the cannons accurately. And for days, the Japanese soldiers keep learning from him. Eventually, John and Mariko go to the seashore. There, John praises the Japanese for how quickly they learn his tactics. Then he proposes another plan. He wants to build a fleet, which means he needs his crew to be released from Edo. Unfortunately, Mariko says this is impossible, because it would violate the agreement between John and Toranaga. While they are talking, John suddenly feels the ground shake. It is an earthquake. It is John's first time experiencing one, so Mariko tells him that many more disasters await him here. Tsunamis and massive fires that can consume entire cities. That is why their houses are designed to be rebuilt as quickly as they are destroyed. The next day, when the troops are about to resume training, news arrives from the west. Ishido's forces have arrived and forced their way through the guard post. The commander immediately goes to Yabushige and hands him a letter. The letter orders Yabushige to return to Osaka to renew his oath of loyalty to the council. But Yabushige refuses. He claims that he is currently learning English tactics in order to defeat the Christians. That is coming soon. Yabushige is very skilled at buying time. He even convinces Jozen, the commander sent there, to stay the night so he can witness how John trains the Japanese in modern warfare. After Jozen agrees, Yabushige tells Omi and Nagakado that he has been ordered to go to Osaka. Everyone knows that if Yabushige goes there, he will likely be ordered to commit seppuku. And that is exactly what he wants to avoid. That night, John, Mariko, and Fuji are having dinner together. John is surprised by the food Mariko is eating. Mariko says it is called natto, the one food said to defeat even the legendary strongman Dede Inoue. She also tells John that he will definitely not like it. When Mariko asks Fuji to give some to her husband, John suddenly takes out a gift. He wants to give it to Fuji as a thank you for defending him earlier that morning. In return, Fuji says she wants John to have her family's katana, because a Hatamoto must carry a sword wherever he goes. Elsewhere, Omi and Nagakado are talking about what Jozen might do tomorrow. Nagakado believes that if Jozen sees their training, he will report everything to Ishido. Omi considers informing Nagakado's father, but Nagakado wants to handle it himself. He wants to prove that he can be strong without relying on his father. Meanwhile, after dinner, John decides to wash himself in a pool. Without him realizing it, Mariko follows him. They talk, and Mariko tells him about her family's past. She says that her family has suffered terrible injustice from the government for many years, and only Toranaga gave her a way out. Hearing this, John feels deep sympathy for her. He promises that if Mariko ever wants to leave Japan, he will take her to London to meet his queen, walk around Richmond Palace, and stroll through the city at night. Without John realizing it, Mariko smiles behind him. That is the moment when Mariko begins to fall in love with the barbarian. Later that night, after Fuji leaves and John falls asleep, Mariko comes back. She wakes him, kisses him, and removes her clothes. They sleep together. The next morning in the soft drizzle, John is enjoying tea with Fuji when Mariko comes to see him. She says he looks happy today. John replies that someone kept him company last night. Mariko says that the woman must have been a good courtesan because she clearly satisfied her lord. This conversation happens without Fuji knowing the truth. Then it is time for training. When everyone has gathered, Nagakado suddenly sabotages everything. He does not want the tactics they have learned to be seen by Ishido's men. Compensation, even though Yabushige tries to stop him. Suddenly, a cannon fires from an unknown direction. The shot slams into Josen's troops, destroying them completely. Everyone panics. Even Yabushige believes this is an act of betrayal, but in Toranaga's name, Nagakado mercilessly beheads Josen. The story then shows Uejiro cleaning up Josen's body, along with the corpses of Ishido's men scattered across the ground. He complains bitterly about why they had to kill them with a cannon, saying that he never wished for bloodshed. Suddenly, a thunderous sound echoes in the distance. It is believed to be a massive army, possibly thousands strong, causing everyone to go on high alert. But when they rush toward the sound, they are stunned. At the head of the massive force stands Lord Toranaga himself. Not only that, Buntaro, Mariko's husband, long believed to be dead after the horrific incident at the docks, has also returned alive. Seeing her husband standing there, Mariko feels as if she is dreaming. She cannot believe what she is seeing. The story then shifts to Ishido's stronghold. Ishido gathers the Council of Regents to prepare for the arrival of Lady Ochiba, who will soon come to Osaka. They also discuss the deep humiliation they suffered when Toranaga resigned. Toranaga's resignation does more than shame them. It forces them to delay his removal, since the council now lacks enough members to proceed. As a result, Ishido proposes appointing one new regent. Several council members suggest close allies, but each name is rejected. Some are deemed too provincial, others too closely tied to Christianity. The most controversial suggestion comes when Ishido proposes Maeda, Ono's cousin. Sugiyama immediately rejects the idea. He refuses to let the council be tainted by the stench of syphilis. Shortly after Sugiyama finishes speaking and the meeting adjourns, he suddenly begins coughing violently. She hands Toranaga notes containing everything Anjin, John, has said so far. Not long after, Nagakado arrives, bringing a bird that his son wanted to present. Instead of accepting it, Toranaga asks Mariko to give the bird to John as a gesture of gratitude. Once Mariko leaves, Toranaga immediately scolds his son. He condemns Nagakado's recklessness for killing Josen, saying that it was equivalent to lighting the signal fire of war for Ishido. Toranaga even suspects that someone may have influenced his son. As punishment, Toranaga removes Nagakado from his position as commander of the artillery regiment. Elsewhere, Ishido, quietly waiting, receives a gift wrapped in white cloth. When he opens it, he finds Josen's severed head inside. Now, back to John. John arrives carrying the bird gifted by Toranaga. In his entire life, John has never received such an honor. He orders everyone not to touch the bird once it is hung. Even though it will begin to rot and smell foul, he insists that no one disobey his command, warning that anyone who touches it will die. Meanwhile, Toranaga speaks privately with Yabushige about the cannon training John has been conducting. Yabushige reports that the training is progressing well. But Toranaga shifts the conversation to something more troubling. He brings up Ishido's order, demanding that Yabushige return to Osaka. Yabushige admits this is true, but claims he ignored the order as a sign of loyalty to Toranaga. Toranaga remains unconvinced. He suspects that Yabushige may be trying to play both sides, even manipulating Nagakado behind the scenes. Yabushige defends himself, insisting he had no role in Nagakado's decision. He then mentions Omi, explaining that the night before the incident, he and Omi were drinking sake together. He promises to discipline Omi as punishment. Instead of agreeing, Toranaga does the opposite. He instructs Yabushige to inform his nephew that Omi is now appointed commander of the artillery regiment. To Toranaga, this is a fitting reward for Omi's courage. After leaving Toranaga, Yabushige continues searching for the spy who has been leaking his secrets. He also informs Omi of his new appointment. To preserve peace, Yabushige sends his general to Osaka to explain the incident to Ishido, hoping to avoid blame for Jozen's death. At John's residence, Buntaro returns, having been ordered by Toranaga to live under the same roof as his wife once again. Despite this, Fuji can still sense Buntaro's arrogance, especially after he insults John in front of her. As Buntaro walks away, he orders preparations for dinner. However, the women decide to eat together first. They discuss two troubling events: Buntaro's return from the dead and John's growing presence as a threat. While they are eating, John arrives. Knowing that Buntaro is coming, John asks quietly what he should prepare himself for. Mariko stood up and told John that he had to join them for dinner and behave properly as a guest. That night, they finally ate together. With Mariko translating, both John and Buntaro began trying to prove who was superior, boasting about their war stories and competing over who could drink the most sake, until they were both nearly drunk. Fortunately, Fuji asked the servants not to bring the final cup of sake that John wanted. Then Buntaro decided to show off his skill. He took a bow and aimed it at a pillar near Mariko. John immediately told Mariko to move away, but Buntaro suddenly released the arrow, and it struck the pillar perfectly. After that, John said that in any country, a wife is often treated as property. But he asked Mariko to tell Buntaro that a wife should be treated with respect and dignity. Buntaro laughed and ordered Mariko to tell the story of her disgraceful family. With tears in her eyes, Mariko explained that before the Taito's rule, her father had been one of the king's closest advisors. But because her father loved the country so much, he eventually killed the king. As punishment, Mariko's entire family was executed one by one. John fell silent after hearing this. Fuji then stopped the conversation, asking everyone to stop talking and drinking, because everything had gone too far. One by one, they left. Later that night, while John was sleeping, he heard screams. It was Mariko. When he opened the door, he saw her covered in blood. Of course, it was Buntaro who had done this. John wanted to help her, but Mariko didn't want anyone interfering in her household affairs. Still, John went to find Buntaro and confronted him. Even though Buntaro couldn't understand John's words, he still respected him as a Hatamoto. He bowed, surrendered his weapons, and explained that he had hurt Mariko because he was carried away by the sake. The next day, Toranaga went to the place where he kept his pigeons, accompanied by Miraji and Nagakado. Toranaga said that Yabushige was becoming more aggressive in searching for spies in the village. Miraji became so frightened that he asked Toranaga for permission to turn himself in, but Toranaga refused. He knew Miraji was no ordinary man. He was a samurai who had served him for many years. Instead, Toranaga ordered Miraji to find another scapegoat to become the village's spy. At Anjin's residence, the villagers began protesting about the terrible smell coming from the dead bird. Some even believed it was cursed. Then John arrived. Fuji had actually asked for permission to throw the corpse away, but John didn't understand her. He was only looking for Mariko. John rode his horse to find Mariko, who was standing by a cliff. He blamed Buntaro for torturing his own wife, but Mariko blamed herself, saying that everything Buntaro did was caused by her own behavior. John wanted to help her escape from the prison she had been living in, but Mariko said that John was the one truly trapped. He was in a foreign land and unable to return to his own country. She said that for now they should only speak for other people, and she didn't want others to always see her together with John. Mariko also revealed that the sword Fuji had given her was not special at all. It had been bought from a drunken young man for 3 sacks of rice. Fuji's grandfather did this so his child wouldn't be ashamed in front of others. John returned home, confused when he saw everyone staring at him. The bird was gone. And because of that, someone had died. It was Uejiro, the old man who took the bird. Since John had said that whoever touched it would die, the villagers took his words seriously, and Uejiro was executed. When John found out, he was furious that people had taken his words so literally. He immediately went to see Toranaga. John said that his duty to teach Western warfare was finished, and he demanded that Toranaga return his crew and his ship so he could leave Japan forever. But after Mariko translated his words, Toranaga didn't answer. He only felt that there was something between the two of them. Then Toranaga stood up, walked to the edge of the land, and looked out over the territory. Suddenly, when no one was watching him, a deep rumbling came from the ground. Panic spread. Another earthquake struck, causing a landslide. There were many victims. Toranaga himself was swept away by the collapsing earth. John reacted quickly. He rushed down, dug through the soil, and managed to pull Toranaga out, who was completely buried in dirt. Once again, John made Toranaga owe him his life. Just like before, when he had given Toranaga Fuji's father's sword, after Toranaga had lost his own. Because of the disaster, many houses were destroyed and burned, and Toranaga's domain was now on the brink of ruin. John also searched for Fuji, who was lying injured. As a sign of respect, he visited Uejiro's graves, remembering that a garden is not special if it has no stones. Meanwhile, in another place, Lady Ochiba finally met Ishido. There she showed her true power. Ochiba knew that Toranaga had fallen and that the Council of Regents was in a weak state. So, in order to protect her son's future, she wanted the Council of Regents under her control. From now on, she wanted every word she spoke to be obeyed. After the earthquake struck the Izu domain, the story briefly flashes back. 22 years earlier, at Izuchi Castle, a little girl is seen running through the dense bamboo grove surrounding the palace. That little girl is Mariko. She had already been introduced to the royal court as the daughter of Akechi Jinsai, and she was even taken in as a subordinate by the man who introduced her. From a young age, Mariko was very active and intelligent. She had friends who were closely connected to the Taiko, but she also often witnessed violence, which slowly darkened her childhood. One day she saw the adults holding an important meeting. That very night, with her own eyes, Mariko witnessed her family being executed one by one because they were accused of betraying the state. Her father wanted to stop it all, but Toranaga stopped him, saying that not everything could be done immediately. From a distance, Mariko and her father looked at each other, their faces filled with despair. After that tragedy, Mariko grew into a strong woman. She often traveled together with Lady Ochiba, the heir's guardian. She went through a long and painful journey to reach her current position, especially when she was forced to marry Buntaro in order to protect her family's remaining honor. Even though Mariko was unhappy, she accepted everything so that her family's name could be cleansed in Japan. After the earthquake, Toranaga gave a speech before his men, saying that natural disasters are part of destiny because the end of all life is death. Even though they had been struck by disaster, Toranaga wanted everyone to know who had saved his life, Anjin, John Blackthorne. As a reward, Toranaga granted him the Kanagawa lands worth 600 koku. Not only that, John was also appointed as a Hatamoto admiral and a general who would command the cannon regiment. At the end of the ceremony, Toranaga presented John with a katana. The men cheered loudly to raise their spirits. Toranaga's generosity made some people jealous, especially Omi, who questioned Yabushige about why such rewards were given to him. But Yabushige responded calmly. He said they needed to be patient because they were currently in a losing position. There was no need to worry about the barbarian until the situation had truly stabilized. Then, Yabushige ordered his men to prepare their wills. Meanwhile, two people who were secretly in love were in the same place, separated by walls and by religion. They prayed to their own gods. John could hear Mariko's quiet sobs, and Mariko could feel John's sorrow as well. At Toranaga's temporary stronghold, Buntaro came to apologize for the trouble he had caused at the Hatamoto's residence. He admitted that whenever he was near Mariko, he could not control himself. Toranaga actually suggested that Buntaro divorce Mariko, but Buntaro refused, saying that he still had not managed to change her. He said that the only reason they had married was to save Mariko from execution, yet so far he had never even received a word of thanks from her. Since Buntaro refused, Toranaga only ordered him to stay away from Mariko for 7 days. Not long after Buntaro left Toranaga's chamber, John and Mariko arrived together. There, John said that he wanted to refuse the rewards Toranaga had given him. Not because he didn't need them, but because he felt he didn't deserve them. More than anything, he wanted to leave Japan and get his ship back. John argued that he could still be useful in another way. If he could sail again, he would attack the Portuguese black ships that threatened the balance of the Catholic Christian powers. He still needed John's services, and in the end, he chose to stop the discussion. After John left, Toranaga admitted that he sensed something strange between his interpreter and the Anjin. At first, Mariko said she was only doing her duty as a translator. But Toranaga firmly warned her that he would not allow his clan to be destroyed because of personal matters. So Toranaga ordered her to take the Anjin to a pleasure house to clear his mind. He also told Mariko to stay inside while the Anjin was being entertained, so she could listen to their conversation. Meanwhile, in the Edo region, an attack took place. Ishido was becoming increasingly furious at Toranaga's actions. Fortunately, Toranaga's right-hand man managed to escape and rushed to warn him about what had happened to his homeland. In Osaka, they were holding a puppet theater performance, a play based on events from the past. The regents were seen discussing Ishido's many flaws. They said that the hostages would never be released until Toranaga was dead. One advisor even wondered how Ishido could have become so powerful. He was nothing more than a Kosho who had been favored by the Taiko, clever in some ways, but not truly great. As Lady Ochiba enjoyed the performance and listened to the conversation, she remembered the moment when she was first chosen to become Lady Ochiba. She had been selected so that the Taiko could finally have an heir because his lawful wife could not give him one. After the performance ended, Lady Ochiba and Ishido went to meet the puppeteer, the man behind the entire show. They praised Lord Ito like a living masterpiece, but their flattery was not meaningless. In truth, Ishido and Lady Ochiba were persuading Ito to join the Council of Regents so he could authorize the execution of those who had tried to assassinate the heir. Unable to resist their temptation, Ito agreed. Ishido and Ochiba then walked away together, once again discussing the problem of Toranaga. Ishido praised Ochiba's tactics, saying they reminded him of Taiko's power. Ochiba replied that they were all living under a shadow, and the only way to erase that shadow, she said, was to execute Toranaga. Hiramatsu, who had managed to escape, finally reached Izu. He was found by the Anjin, unconscious after falling from his horse. Fortunately, Hiramatsu survived and immediately announced what Ishido had done. Everyone who heard about Ishido's cruelty was furious. Hiramatsu and Yabushige then proposed launching Crimson Sky, the strategy planned by Toranaga's clan to attack Osaka Castle in a single decisive strike. They could also ask for help from Toranaga's younger brother, Saeki Nobutatsu, to strengthen their forces. Many of the young men supported the idea, especially Omi and Nagakato, who were burning with excitement to go to war, knowing that their lord had never lost when it came to strategy. But Toranaga rejected the plan outright. He did not want unnecessary bloodshed. As long as there was still time, he said, they had to find a way to bring down Ishido without sacrificing countless lives. While the men were discussing war, the women, Mariko and Fuji, were negotiating to hire Kiku, a famous courtesan, to serve their lord. Kiku's broker felt honored that Toranaga wanted to use the services of her finest pupil. However, she set a very high price, explaining that their courtesans were not ordinary. They were trained in many arts, not just in pleasing their clients. After a long and difficult negotiation, they finally agreed on a price: 300 monmei for one night with John Blackthorne. Kiku, who was Omi's lover, had already heard about the arrangement. But she tried to calm Omi down, saying that the Anjin meant nothing to her. This was only her work. That night, John was escorted exclusively by Mariko to the place where he would meet Kiku. On the way, John asked whether Toranaga knew about this. Mariko refused to answer until they arrived at a temple. Soon, Kiku appeared and poured sake. Mariko told John to praise whatever Kiku did. At first, John was not interested, but he began to feel disturbed when Kiku spoke about things that challenged his faith. In truth, it was not Kiku who fascinated him. It was Mariko. In the end, Kiku led him into a private room while Mariko chose to leave. Only in the morning did Mariko return to pick John up, after he had been cleaned and dressed. People who saw that John had been entertained by Kiku felt jealous. John then asked Mariko to thank Kiku for her extraordinary service. After escorting John back to his residence, Mariko went to see Toranaga and informed him that John had been well taken care of. Suddenly, Toranaga asked her what she remembered most about her childhood. It turned out that Toranaga knew Mariko and Ochiba had once been very close. Mariko said that Ochiba's former name had been Ruri. Toranaga then asked what had made Ochiba so powerful now. After being chosen as the Taiko's consort and the heir's mother, Ochiba had transformed into a woman of extraordinary strength. Mariko said she could never compare herself to her, especially since her own family had once brought shame to the entire country. But Toranaga defended her, telling her that the war was not over yet. At Osaka Castle, the appointment ceremony began. Ito was about to be elevated as a regent, until one man stepped forward, Sugiyama. He refused. Sugiyama said he would not complete the Council of Regents, as long as Ishido continued to hold hostages. He apologized, saying that their ways of thinking were no longer the same, and he therefore rejected Ito's appointment. He spoke with Ochiba about removing Sugiyama. Then, Ochiba revealed a shocking truth. It was true that Akechi, Mariko's father, had killed her father. But what was even more shocking was that the one who had orchestrated everything was Toranaga. According to Ochiba, Toranaga had secretly whispered to the council and pushed them to have her father killed. Ishido welcomed this accusation. With this, they could accelerate Toranaga's destruction. The next day, Ishido took action. He and his troops stormed Sugiyama's castle. Sugiyama already knew what was coming. He only warned Ishido that everything would be meaningless, even if Ishido killed him. Not long after, Sugiyama and his men were slaughtered. The news of Sugiyama's death soon reached Toranaga. He immediately gathered his forces and exposed Ishido's treachery. And now, clearly and openly, Toranaga declared to all his men. He was ready to launch Crimson Sky and attack Osaka Castle in a single, decisive strike. Then we are shown the atmosphere after a war. People are cheering, their voices roaring in celebration, signaling that the war is over. It is time to celebrate, because Lord Toranaga has won. But this is not a war against Ishido or Osaka. This is the very first war Toranaga fought, 46 years ago, when he was still a child. Mounted on his horse, Toranaga looked magnificent as the commander of the battlefield. His enemy, Mizuguchi, surrendered honorably before him and said that he wished to be remembered as the only man in history to be beheaded by a child warlord. Without hesitation, Toranaga stood beside him, drew his katana, and as Mizuguchi committed seppuku, Toranaga swung his blade and severed his head in a single strike. Toranaga's troops are seen waiting for the arrival of his younger brother. In that moment, Yabushige asks Hiromatsu how long it has been since Toranaga last spoke to his brother. Hiromatsu replies, "A very long time." Yabushige then wonders, what if Toranaga's brother refuses to join us? Hiromatsu answers, "Then we will lose before we even begin." Not long after, the sound of marching footsteps is heard. Hundreds of Seiki Nobutatsu's troops finally arrive. Toranaga warmly welcomes his younger brother as the eldest of the family. They joke and laugh like a close family, reunited after a long time apart. Seiki is also greeted by John, who uses his broken Japanese to show his respect. After welcoming him properly, Seiki declares that his army is ready to fight alongside Toranaga's forces. Toranaga then invites him inside the domain to bathe and rest. Before getting down to serious matters, Toranaga, as usual, offers courtesans to Seiki. However, he is shocked to learn that the price, normally 300 manmei, has risen dramatically. Fortunately, Mariko says she can negotiate the price down, as long as Toranaga is willing to meet privately with the broker. Not long after that, John suddenly arrives. He says he wants to ask what his duties will be during the war preparations. After Mariko translates, Toranaga admits that he has not yet decided what John should do and wants to end the conversation. But John insists. He wants to repay Toranaga for everything he has done for him. However, because Mariko hesitates to translate his words, John finally bows and says that he is ready to accept whatever fate awaits him, as long as he can stand beside Toranaga. Toranaga is clearly moved by this, and John leaves. Elsewhere, Omi Kiku's lover tries to see her, but Jin stops him, saying that Kiku has been booked for an entire week by Toranaga. Even though Omi only wants to talk, she even suggests that Omi choose another woman, but he declines. Before leaving, Gin casually mentions that she saw John sleeping with Kiku while thinking about another woman. At Fuji's residence, her grandfather Hiromatsu suddenly arrives. For some urgent reason, he wants to give his granddaughter a gift. The gift is grim, the heads of two men close to Fuji, to remind her of death. Then, out of nowhere, Fuji says that she plans to join them and kill herself after everything is over. A shocked Hiromatsu asks why she does not want to live and enjoy their victory. But Fuji doubts that there will be any victory at all. Elsewhere, Nagakado, Yabushige, and the others are waiting, while Saeki enjoys the hot springs. Nagakado wonders what they will do to attack Osaka. No one answers, because no one can read Toranaga's mind. Everyone prepares a great feast to celebrate the alliance between Toranaga and Seiki. Sake is poured, countless dishes are served, and they gather together. Seiki begins to tell stories about the past, about the times he and Toranaga fought together. He recalls that his older brother was a formidable warrior. At only 12 years old, Toranaga had defeated Mizoguchi and beheaded him with a single strike. Everyone is shocked by this story. Then Seiki tells another embarrassing tale about the time Toranaga was sent away as a hostage to secure an alliance, and was so terrified that he wet himself and had to ride on horseback for 5 kilometers in that condition. No one laughs. The room falls silent. Then Seiki asks Nagakado what he prefers: stories, legends, or the fact that he prefers Izu's gifts in exchange for an alliance. At this moment, Toranaga begins to feel suspicious. The conversation shifts, and his bad premonition finally comes true. Seiki calmly announces that he has accepted another offer. Suddenly, his troops block all exits from Izu. Everyone panics, especially Toranaga's men: Hiromatsu, Buntaro, and Nagakado. But Toranaga remains calm. He tells Hiromatsu to read the letter Seiki has brought. Slowly, Hiromatsu explains that Seiki, now one of the regents, has become Ishido's representative. He has come to demand that Toranaga admit his treason and go to Osaka to receive his punishment. Not only that, the letter also addresses Nagakado's killing of Jozen. Ishido demands that Nagakado commit seppuku. Toranaga immediately orders Nagakado not to accept the letter. He then asks Saeki to give him until the next morning to decide whether he will go to Osaka or not. After that, Saeki coldly places them all under house arrest and orders that no one be allowed to leave the domain. The next morning, Saeki's troops completely surround the mountain area, watching Toranaga's forces' every move. John asks what will happen if they are taken to Osaka. Mariko explains that Toranaga will be executed, and half of his men will be ordered to commit seppuku. Suddenly, John gets an idea. He says he wants to check the ship's hull. He believes he can get help from Yabushige's men to inspect the cannons, and maybe they can still do something. When Mariko asks what exactly he means, John only says, "Anything is better than wasting time here." As dawn approaches, Toranaga goes alone into the mountains. He breathes deeply, trying to clear his mind and make the best possible decision while remembering the first time he ever cut off a man's head. Elsewhere, Seiki meets with Yabushige to discuss Ishido's secret agreement with the council. Seiki admits that Ishido had once promised to return Yabushige's general, but instead, what he sees now is a container holding the severed head of that very general. On the beach, John keeps observing the sea, searching for an opportunity. Suddenly, he notices several ships anchored offshore. He asks Muraji whose crest is displayed on them. Muraji answers that the emblem belongs to Lord Ishido. While Toranaga is in seclusion, His retainers speculate about what decision he will make. Buntaro even considers leaving to warn the troops in Edo. Unfortunately, Hiromatsu informs them that Saeki's forces have already surrounded the area. Not long after, the meditation session ends. Everyone is curious about Toranaga's decision, so Nagakado takes the initiative to ask about the result. Toranaga only replies, "Why is it always those who have never fought who are so eager for war?" Then he walks away. On his way, Toranaga is stopped by Gin, who wants to collect on his promise regarding Kiku's payment. At first, Nagakado tries to cut in and pay immediately. But Toranaga does not break his promises. He agrees to speak privately with Gin to hear her request. Gin then explains her wishes. She knows Toranaga is building a new city in Edo. Even though Toranaga says he himself sees no bright future for now, Gin wants a better life for her courtesans. She dreams of becoming a respected woman of entertainment. Therefore, she asks Toranaga to create policies that will protect women like them in Edo and provide programs to support their future. Sadly, Toranaga does not refuse, but he cannot give any certainty either because he himself is in great trouble. When the time of one incense stick has passed without a clear answer, Gin decides to leave. As time grows short, Yabushige approaches Seiki's troops at the bathhouse. When Seiki's men see Yabushige draw his katana, they think they are about to be killed. Instead, Yabushige simply wants to bathe. He suddenly removes his clothes and sinks into the hot water. Omi and Nagakado do the same. They begin talking about the beautiful past of Izu before the barbarian John Blackthorne arrived. Although Nagakado says Izu was a poor village, Omi admits that it still felt pure and peaceful back then. While they are mocking Seiki's troops as weak samurai, Seiki suddenly appears. Hearing that words, he warns Nagakado to watch his mouth. Death, he says, never comes late. It always comes swiftly and strikes the right target. Back on the shore, John continues watching the passing ships until Yabushige approaches him. Even though they are hindered by the language barrier, Yabushige knows that John understands his frustration. Suddenly, Yabushige challenges John to a sword match. Not knowing what to do, John only tries to block his attacks. Because John is still a beginner, he is quickly kicked to the ground. Without him realizing it, Buntaro, who has been watching for a long time, draws his katana and points it straight at John's head. John Blackthorne knows that Buntaro hates him, so he asks him to end it right there. But Yabushige stops Buntaro, and he finally lowers his sword. The focus then returns to Toranaga. He is seen preparing his will, ordering that all the lands of Okazaki be reserved for his heirs until they come of age. He also sets aside 2 cho of land in Edo. Suddenly, Buntaro arrives and asks to speak with him in private, with Mariko present. With respect, Buntaro admits that he wants to kill John because he hates the way John looks at his wife. Toranaga does not accept this request. He says Buntaro is making accusations without solid proof. Mariko can only surrender herself to fate, knowing her life is in her husband's hands. Since Toranaga refuses, Buntaro apologizes for his rude words and leaves. After that, Toranaga sternly asks Mariko whether she stands with him against her father's enemies, or with the barbarian. Holding back her tears, Mariko answers that she has served Toranaga with all her heart. She says she has always been ready for death, and now she can no longer endure it. She suddenly takes out a knife, and asks Toranaga for permission to commit seppuku. It is extremely painful for Toranaga to hear this. He throws the knife away and leaves, staring at the sky as heavy rain begins to fall. At last, the time comes for Saeki to receive his answer. All of Toranaga's forces gather, including John and Mariko. Saeki demands Toranaga's official response to Ishido's letter. Calmly and firmly, Toranaga announces that he will obey the Council of Regents and surrender himself, accepting all consequences. Hearing this shocking decision, everyone stands up in protest, questioning what is really happening. But Toranaga stops them, saying that the realm must not be destroyed by the ego of a single clan. The day of Toranaga's death now seems only hours away. After Saeki's victory, he celebrates by sleeping with Kiku, the famous courtesan. While enjoying himself, Seiki promises to build her a fine palace if she agrees to become his 7th wife. After Seiki reaches his peak, Kiku suddenly offers him another kind of pleasure, using a special tool. Seiki eagerly agrees. While Kiku leaves to fetch it, a sudden commotion is heard. Without warning, Nagakado appears. He kills Seiki's guards, and then goes after Seiki, who is barely covered by a cloth. Seiki runs for his life, while Nagakado chases him with a drawn katana. It seems that Nagakado is finally about to fulfill his wish to kill the traitor of his family. But then, a cruel twist of fate happens. Just as Nagakado is about to strike, he slips on the wet ground, falls, and his head slams into a large rock. Fresh blood begins to flow from his head. In no time at all, Nagakado dies before he can kill Seiki. After Lord Nagakado's death, everyone falls into mourning, especially Lord Toranaga. The procession prepares for Nagakado's final journey. Along the way, John asks what Seiki's forces will do next. Mariko answers that they will remain at the border, allowing 49 days of mourning before everyone is taken to Osaka to surrender. Even though John Blackthorne is from a different land, he approaches Toranaga to offer his condolences. Toranaga does not reply, he only nods. Then John is given back his journal, which Toranaga had previously taken from him. Mariko explains that once they reach the city, John will not be asked to go with them to Osaka. He will be released and reunited with his crew. Although John's fate seems relatively good, he still asks about Mariko's future. He even specifically asks her not to go to Osaka. However, Mariko answers that her loyalty to Lord Toranaga cannot be broken. The mystery behind this death seems to trace back to Ishido and Lady Ochiba. Their plan of deception succeeds after one of the Minawara clan is killed in a rather humiliating way. Still, Ochiba does not grow overconfident. Even though Toranaga's son is dead, she remains cautious until Toranaga himself bows before them. Suddenly, Ishido says that to strengthen their alliance, he wants to reveal something. He honestly admits that before the Taiko died, he had already been captivated by Ochiba, and so had their lord. Ochiba's beauty, elegance, and courage have mesmerized many men. Therefore, to strengthen their alliance, Ishido wants to make their relationship public, because he intends to marry Ochiba. He knows she will not accept immediately, so he asks her to consider his proposal. Soon, the funeral is about to begin. Nagakado's body has been cleansed, and his weapons are placed beside him. People gather to honor him, speaking kindly of him. They admit that although Nagakado was reckless, he was devoted to one thing above all else: his loyalty to Lord Toranaga. In the morning, the procession is ready to escort Nagakado's body, but something feels strange. Toranaga does not attend his own son's funeral. Meanwhile, Hiromatsu and Yabushige are discussing the surrender of weapons to Osaka. When they arrive at the cremation site, the monks begin the rites, and the burning soon follows. Everyone bows their heads in solemn respect. As the smoke from Nagakado's body rises into the sky, Toranaga watches the ceremony from a distant place. Elsewhere, Mariko is holding Toranaga's newest grandchild, a baby girl. She feels both happy and deeply sad when she also hears that Toranaga's health has been worsening since Nagakado's death. They begin to talk, and Mariko asks about her sister in Osaka. The woman says they only communicate through official letters. Not wanting to disturb their conversation, he simply invites Mariko to have tea with him. Fortunately, Mariko accepts her husband's invitation. Deep in the village, John is talking with a villager, asking for more firewood. Because of the language barrier, Sujin suddenly arrives and translates John's words. John thanks Sujin for helping, but explains that this is not exactly what he meant. He was actually asking for more charcoal. After the villager agrees to John's request, Sujin invites him to talk. He asks what John plans to do next, after being dismissed by Toranaga. John says he will return to his ship and continue his journey with his crew. Sujin smiles, puzzled that John, now a Hatamoto, should be living in a castle with his wife. Instead, John is in the village, talking to commoners. Not long after, Sujin goes to the castle to meet the lords. Mariko, Hiromatsu, and Toranaga are there. They discuss Toranaga's promise to the priests. Sujin reports that he has done his best to persuade Lord Ono and Kiyama, but unfortunately, they refuse to ally with Toranaga. After hearing this, Toranaga forbids Tsujin from speaking Japanese and asks Mariko to translate everything instead. Tsujin continues and suggests that Toranaga should try to form an alliance with Lady Ochiba, because his true enemy is not Osaka, but Ishido. Tsujin believes that if Toranaga is willing, the heirs will become his vassals. Hiramatsu strongly agrees with this opinion, but Toranaga continues to consider it carefully. He then asks Mariko whether it is possible that Ochiba would accept his offer. Mariko answers that the only thing Ochiba truly fears is the fear within her own heart. Toranaga falls silent, then says that he no longer wants any more bloodshed after his son's death. Therefore, he wants all the High Lords to sign an agreement to join him in surrender. He stands up and tells Tsujin that he will keep his promise to grant land to the priests so they can build a church in Edo. The story then shifts elsewhere. Mariko and Buntaro enter a small hut together and recite a poem they both love. After the poem, Buntaro prepares tea and asks Mariko to drink it with calm and respect. In the silence, Buntaro suddenly says that they will die tonight. Because of that, he wants them to remember the days when they first became husband and wife. Then Buntaro expresses his wish to die together with Mariko as husband and wife. Mariko immediately rejects what he says. She even declares that she would rather live for 1,000 years without praying than die together with him. Then Mariko stands up and leaves, while Buntaro is left behind, crying over his wife's rejection. That night, John is escorted by a village chief to meet his crew again, who are staying in Funeyado. The chief says that they have spent more than a month drinking sake until they were constantly drunk. And indeed, when John sees his crew again for the first time, he turns around and decides to leave. But one of his crewmen, Salomon, recognizes him as their captain. Salomon calls out to him, and they begin to talk. However, instead of talking about how to escape from Japan, Salomon blames John for his ambition, which caused them all to be stranded here. It turns out they could have returned safely to England long ago. Unfortunately, John's ambition, to have his name recorded as the first Englishman to discover Japan, made them all suffer. Unwilling to be blamed, John punches Salomon, and a fight breaks out. Because Salomon is under the influence of alcohol, he cannot fight back. Whether intentionally or not, John keeps beating him until he is completely helpless. When he sees Salomon lying on the ground, the village chief quickly urges John to leave. The next day, realizing that he has no chance to leave Japan, John goes to Yabashige and offers himself as the owner of a ship that will sail under Yabushige's name. He says that he has the skills and is ready to teach Yabushige's men how to sail. However, when Mariko translates John's request, Yabushige rejects it outright. He even laughs at John's desperation. John refuses to give up. He says that he still remembers the time when Yabushige almost died on the cliff. From that moment, John knew that Yabushige was just like him. He believes that their fates are decided by their own hands. Yabushige falls silent for a moment. But, in the end, he still refuses John's request, explaining that he will follow his lord and sign the surrender to Osaka. Elsewhere, Toranaga's promises begin to come true one by one. The courtesans truly receive land to build an entertainment district for their workers. Kiku says that owning a vast piece of land has always been her mistress's dream. Not far from there, Tsujin is inspecting the land Toranaga has given for the construction of a church. Unfortunately, he is shocked to learn that the church will stand directly opposite the courtesan's quarter. In Osaka, a similar tragedy is unfolding. Lady Daioin is in critical condition. Accompanied by Ochiba, Daioin says that she believes Ochiba will be the last person she sees before she dies. She asks Ochiba to free the hostages and to never trust Ishido again. After Ochiba gives her pain medicine, Lady Daioin dies not long afterward. Now let us focus on the signing of the surrender. All the commanders are present: Hiramatsu, Buntaro, Omi, Yabushige, and several of Toranaga's generals. There, Toranaga asks all of his men to sign the document and surrender together with him. Yabushige and Omi sign it. But when the signing reaches Hiramatsu, one of the generals stops him. He refuses, He firmly asks Toranaga to reconsider his decision to surrender to Osaka. They feel that this is not the Toranaga they know. Toranaga angrily orders them not to question his decision. Even so, Hiramatsu, one of Toranaga's closest companions, declares that he will not give in so easily. He says he is ready to let Ishido's army try to attack their territory, but Toranaga strongly opposes this because he no longer wants any more bloodshed. Since Toranaga's decision is final, Hiramatsu declares that he will commit seppuku as an act of protest. In front of everyone, he calls Buntaro, his son, and asks him to cut off his head. When Buntaro wants to die with him, Hiramatsu tells him that he must live and bear the pain of being rejected by his lord. As a final farewell, Hiramatsu opens his robe, draws his blade, and stabs himself in the abdomen. Moments later, Buntaro, already holding his katana, beheads his own father. The head rolls across the floor and stops right in front of Toranaga. Everyone stands in stunned silence, witnessing this tragic scene. That night, Mariko approaches Toranaga, who is lost in thought. There, Toranaga asks Mariko if she is ready to carry out her duty. Mariko nods. Toranaga tells her that Osaka must believe in his decision to surrender. Elsewhere, Yabushige finally agrees to John's request to become his ally. He does not care if he is called a traitor by the clan. What matters most to him is that he does not want to die together with Buntaro. As everyone prepares to depart, Mariko suddenly arrives with a letter from Toranaga, stating that she must go with them. Then we see Toranaga visiting Nagakado's grave. There, he thanks his son and his dearest friend, because their sacrifices will not be in vain. Now the true struggle is about to begin. The story then shifts to Mariko's past. Set in the Shonai region 14 years earlier, she is arrested for the third time while trying to take her own life after her father, Akechi Jinsai, has been declared a traitor to the realm. Even so, a kind-hearted priest named Tsujin comes to see her. He speaks to her gently, trying to persuade Mariko to remember God. He tells her that by remembering God, her dark thoughts will slowly fade away. Then Tsujin gives her a cross necklace, telling her to keep it close in case she ever loses her grip on life. Mariko, lost in thought, can only remain silent, with tears already dried on her cheeks. The story returns to the present, where Yabushige's group has arrived in Osaka. John approaches Mariko and asks why she has come with them. Mariko replies that her purpose is different from Yabushige's and from John's. Not long after that, Yabushige comes and asks Mariko to tell John that he must stay with him during the meeting with Ishido. John quickly bows, showing that he understands. As Mariko and John leave the dock area, Yabushige mutters that he truly hates the city of Osaka. Soon they finally reach Osaka Castle. Yabushige once again reminds John to remember their purpose here. He wants the two of them to stand together when presenting their proposal to Lord Ishido. Although John's Japanese is still awkward, Yabushige seems to understand him well enough. They part ways, while Mariko goes to meet Lady Kiri, who apologizes because Toranaga's delegation has been given only a small residence. Lady Kiri also asks about Toranaga's condition, but after Mariko hands her a letter, she understands the situation. Elsewhere, the Portuguese are growing uneasy about John's increasing closeness to the Japanese court. Tsujin believes that John has come to Osaka to seek his own path, but the others do not trust him. Even the head priest senses something strange. The atmosphere itself makes him feel that a war may be approaching. Before the meeting begins, Yabushige teaches John how to bow properly. Only after he feels John is ready do they go to the castle. Yabushige opens the conversation by expressing his condolences for Lady Daioin's death. However, Ishido responds coldly, still seeing Yabushige as a traitor and a flatterer. Even so, Yabushige insists that he was framed by Toranaga. Then, as an apology, he offers Anjin, John, as a gift. He claims that John has become a valuable hatamoto to Toranaga. Unfortunately, the heir does not like John at all, and the gift is rejected. In the end, both of them return to their seats. Then, it is Mariko's turn to speak before Ishido and Lady Ochiba. She congratulates them on their engagement, and informs them that Toranaga is still in mourning. After that, Mariko reminisces with Lady Ochiba about their shared love of poetry when they were young. This gives Ochiba the idea to hold a poetry contest. However, Mariko politely refuses, saying that she will be leaving again the next morning. This information immediately angers Ishido, because he does not allow Mariko to leave so easily. Mariko defends herself by saying that she must escort her lord back to Edo, and that this is her duty as a retainer. Ishido is still not satisfied, and he asks the Council of Regents to confirm that Mariko is not allowed to leave Osaka. The council agrees with Ishido, but with unwavering resolve, Mariko stands up and declares that she is not a peasant who can be trampled at will. She is the daughter of the great Akechi Jinsai, a samurai lineage that has stood for 1,000 years. Therefore, she says, she is free to leave Osaka without needing permission from either the regents or Ishido. Everyone is shocked by her words. Ishido restrains his anger because he is about to attend a meeting with the Council of Regents. After the audience ends, Yabushige immediately approaches Mariko and asks about what happened the night before. Mariko says nothing. She only admits that she is tired. Yabushige is still furious, feeling that Mariko has put them all in danger of being killed. Mariko remains silent, and Yabushige finally walks away. John does the same, still confused as to why Mariko is willing to sacrifice herself just to protect Toranaga. But Mariko remains firm in her belief that she is only carrying out her lord's orders. After the meeting, Mariko's son, who witnessed his mother's brave words, approaches her and questions her actions. He warns her that Lord Kiyama, the highest authority among the Christians, will punish her. He even threatens that if his mother is humiliated again, he will disown her and no longer call her his mother. Mariko's eyes fill with tears. She is now trapped in a terrible dilemma: obey her lord's command or protect her own son. The next day finally arrived. Mariko and her group were ready to leave Osaka Castle. Everyone witnessed the scene. When Mariko's guards tried to pass through the gate, they were stopped by the gatekeepers, who demanded official permission from Ishido. Mariko's guards replied that they did not need such permission, but they were still blocked. Without hesitation, Mariko gave the order to kill them. Instantly, her guards cut down 2 of the gatekeepers, and that was when a small war began. Mariko's men forced their way out and clashed with the castle guards. However, they were eventually overwhelmed and defeated. Now, only Mariko remained. She ordered her men to retreat. The people watching began to panic, especially Kiyama, who feared something terrible would happen to her. Mariko, a strong and fearless woman, asked for a sword and fought alone against the guards. Even though she put up a brave fight, she was outnumbered. In the end, she fell. Kiyama shouted at the guards not to hurt her. Mariko finally surrendered and ordered her men to withdraw. But all of this was a signal. Mariko had decided to commit suicide after being humiliated and ordered to abandon her mission by her own lord. As a Christian, she asked Lord Kiyama to be the one to behead her at sunset. Mariko's decision immediately forced the Council of Regents to hold a meeting. Kiyama was torn. On one side, he had to defend Mariko as a fellow Christian. On the other, he had to fulfill his duty as a member of the council. Most of them doubted that Mariko would really kill herself, except Ochiba. She said they did not truly know Mariko. She was a woman who always kept her word, and if Mariko really died, there would be an uprising among the nobles in Osaka. Now, Ishido had only 2 choices: either let Mariko die, or let her leave Osaka Castle. After the council meeting ended, Lady Ochiba summoned John to meet her. In front of the heir, who was playing alone, Ochiba was impressed by how cleverly John answered all her questions. Soon, Mariko arrived to serve as their interpreter. But instead of speaking to John, Ochiba chose to reminisce with Mariko about their youth, about the time when Mariko still knew how to place herself properly. Now, Mariko was different. She carried a great ambition, driven by her loyalty to her lord. John became confused by the situation, especially when Lady Ochiba seemed to attack Mariko verbally, asking her to stop this dangerous game. Mariko replied that she was only carrying out her lord's orders. Then she turned Ochiba's words back on her, saying that only Ochiba herself could stop this game. Ochiba fell silent. Tears streamed down her face as she asked how Mariko could kill herself when she still had a son. At that moment, Mariko felt the meeting had become unhealthy, so she asked John to leave with her. As they walked away, John stopped her and begged her to find another way, any other way than killing herself. He said Toranaga still had thousands of soldiers who could fight for them. But Mariko stopped him. This was her own decision. John felt heartbroken. He told her that she had devoted her entire life to Toranaga, and then, unable to hold it in anymore, he asked her to live for John Blackthorne. Mariko fell silent. She gently held John's arm, then walked away. That night, John stood alone in front of his room, while Mariko reflected on her past sins, remembering her confession before Tsujin. Finally, the day of seppuku arrived. Mariko prepared the small blade to cut open her belly and summoned Kiyama to be her second. But before Kiyama could proceed, John suddenly arrived. He held Mariko's hands and declared that he would be the one to behead her instead of Kiyama. Mariko gave him her cross necklace, then prepared herself for the ritual. But just as she was about to plunge the blade into her body, Ishido arrived. He granted Mariko permission to leave Osaka. Hearing those words, Mariko's body went weak. The other hostages immediately asked for permission to leave as well. After that tense moment, John came to Mariko's room while she was alone and kissed her, grateful that she was still alive. That night, Yabushige was walking along the castle walls. At first, he made small talk with the guards. Then suddenly, he killed them. Out of nowhere, dozens of shinobi appeared and began slaughtering everyone in the castle. They were assassins, and their target was Mariko. John and Mariko, who had just woken up, immediately armed themselves. The guards took their positions, but they were outnumbered. The shinobi kept coming, forcing them to retreat into a storehouse. Under pressure, they overheard the shinobi planning to blow up the building. John tried to find a way to save everyone. But suddenly, Mariko blocked the door with her own body. She said that tonight was the night of her death. And moments later, an explosion erupted. The final episode opens with the face of an aging Anjin, John Blackthorne, his eyes clouded by cataracts. He now has a grandchild who is staring at a sword the family believes was given by a barbaric people from Japan. But behind those faded eyes lies a terrifying story, one that begins with John awakening after the bombing inside the temple. He is awakened by Yabushige, who shows him Mariko's shattered body. John desperately tries to wake her, but it is clear she will never open her eyes again. With a broken heart, John entrusts Mariko's soul to God and prays that she will be accepted into his embrace. Toranaga is seen standing on a cliff, gazing at the distant city of Osaka, as if he already knows what has happened. In Osaka, the city is in mourning as a procession carries Mariko's body. The Council of Regents gathers to discuss this dark tragedy, because Lord Kiyama is certain that one of the council members must be responsible. Even Toranaga's brother sends a letter of condemnation regarding Mariko-sama's death. Everyone in the council is anxious, fearing that Toranaga will launch a retaliation. But Ishido remains confident in his position. He also insists that they should not honor Mariko too much, because she is still an Akechi, a traitor. However, Lady Ochiba strongly opposes this. She believes Mariko deserves great honor in death. After their debate, Japan is suddenly struck by an earthquake, as if nature itself is mourning the loss of its finest daughter. The meeting is dismissed, and Ishido approaches Yabushige, who is standing alone in deep thought. He asks about Yabushige's hearing after the blast. Sadly, Yabushige seems to have lost some control over himself. He speaks nonsense, and even jumps into a pond after claiming to see a catfish in it, though Ishido sees nothing there. In the end, Ishido orders Yabushige to return to Izu and prepare his troops, because all the hostages have now been allowed to leave Osaka. From afar, Toranaga releases a bird into the sky, carrying a quiet wish for the birth of many daughters. Still traumatized, the last person to wake from the attack is John. He comes out of a coma several days after Mariko's funeral. John is told that he must leave Osaka immediately, with Lord Kiyama's permission. He rushes to depart the castle, where Tsujin meets him and is assigned to escort him to Yabushige, who is waiting at the bay. Along the way, they talk about Mariko's kindness. John also tells Tsujin that he does not know who Toranaga truly is, the man who freed all the hostages in Osaka without dirtying his hands, without war, and using only one woman. Tsujin says that perhaps Mariko would be happy if the two of them could get along. Before John boards Yabushige's ship, Tsujin tells him the truth. All of this is thanks to Mariko. Before she died, Mariko asked the church to spare John's life, and Tsujin kept that promise. John then boards the ship, where Yabushige is waiting. Yabushige wants John to sail with him, and even dreams of going to England, John's homeland. For once, he seems unusually cheerful, especially when he asks John to teach him how to dive into the water. But John is not focused on Yabushige's behavior. He is staring at his own ship, which has sunk. When they arrive in Izu, Yabushige does not return as a ruler. Onu has already submitted to Toranaga. He demands that Yabushige surrender his weapons before he can be taken to meet Toranaga. Yabushige complies and is then paraded by his own soldiers, like a prisoner. Meanwhile, John speaks with Miraji about the nighttime attack by the Christian forces, who somehow knew exactly where to strike, at John Blackthorne's ship. Miraji explains what happened in Izu while they were in Osaka. The villagers were forced to keep working until the traitor was found. Severed heads were displayed as a warning, proof that Toranaga was deadly serious. When Yabushige is brought before Toranaga, he is immediately sentenced, especially after Toranaga learns the truth. One of Mariko's maids had sent Toranaga a message before the incident, revealing that Yabushige was involved in the attack that led to Mariko's death. Yabushige confesses. Toranaga orders him to commit seppuku at sunrise the next day. Yabushige refuses at first, saying he wants a more honorable death, but Toranaga denies him that. In the end, Yabushige accepts his fate on one condition. Toranaga himself must be the one to behead him. Toranaga agrees. On a quiet, somber afternoon, John is sitting alone when Fuji comes to see him. John simply tells her that she is beautiful and strong. Elsewhere, Toranaga is celebrating the birth of his son. He thanks Lady Kiri for helping him save the only surviving heir of the Minawara clan. Then, one of the women brings him a message, a letter once written by Lady Ochiba. When Toranaga reads the letter, he looks genuinely surprised. He stands up, takes a deep breath, and then recites a beautiful poem written by Mariko-sama. That same quiet night, a conversation takes place between Fuji and John. Fuji explains that the ashes in front of her are those of her husband and her only child. Now, Fuji tells John that tomorrow she will leave to become a nun. John understands part of what she says, but he refuses to accept it. He asks her to stay, reminding her that she is the wife of a Hatamoto. Fuji replies calmly that she has already fulfilled her duty to Toranaga, and starting tomorrow, she will no longer be the wife of a Hatamoto. Thankfully, John respects Fuji's decision. He asks her to prepare a letter, because he wants to meet Toranaga. The next morning before the meeting, John chooses to meditate in front of the grave of the house's former owner. After that, he meets Omi, who asks him to surrender his swords first. John then says goodbye to Fuji and goes to meet Toranaga, who is standing on a hillside. Accompanied by Miraji, Toranaga orders Miraji to explain that he will not rest until the person who sabotaged John's ship is found. But Miraji feels those words are too complicated to be spoken by a fisherman, so Toranaga tells him to speak the truth. Finally, Miraji speaks in English. He reveals that he is a samurai named Tanamoto Akinao. For many years he has served his lord as a spy. He even joined the Portuguese Christian church as part of his disguise. Only then does Miraji translate Toranaga's words. Hearing this, John is shocked. He realizes that all this time, he has been living with a samurai. Then John explains that the destruction of his ship was not caused by a traitor, but by Mariko herself. Mariko did not want a war between Toranaga and the Catholics. Instead, she destroyed the ship to save the engine's life. Even after hearing this, Toranaga still refuses to stop the search, because he wants the disloyal person in the village to be found. Suddenly, John declares that he is the disloyal one. He says he wishes to commit seppuku in front of Toranaga. At first, Toranaga does not take him seriously, but when John draws his sword and points it at his own heart, Toranaga immediately stops him and strikes him across the face. Then Toranaga finally agrees to stop the search, on one condition. John must stay in Japan and build a fleet for him. Within hours, John's wish is fulfilled. The villagers can finally live in peace again. The severed heads are taken down, and the cruelty finally comes to an end. Now it is time for Yabushige to face his death. He is escorted by Omi and his loyal guards. Before meeting Toranaga, Yabushige gives Omi a poem about his body. He says he does not want to be buried. He wants his corpse to be left in the open, so the hungry dogs can feed on it. Finally, Yabushige meets Toranaga. They reminisce about everything they have been through together. Their first war with Toranaga's nephew, the arrival of the Anjin, and many other events. But there is one thing Yabushige still does not understand. How did Toranaga win this war? What does the Crimson Sky really mean? Before Yabushige dies, Toranaga explains that as long as the Council of Regents stands united, he can never attack Osaka. So he chose to send a woman to do what no samurai or army ever could. Toranaga asks Yabushige to imagine this. In 1 month, all the armies will gather at Sekigahara. 5 great commanders will meet in the same place, and Ishido will believe that the heir's forces are still on his side. But in truth, Lady Ochiba is no longer interested in allying with Ishido after Mariko's death. With that, Toranaga's dream will come true. He will begin in Edo, building a realm of peace, without war and without bloodshed. After a long conversation, Toranaga finally draws his sword. He turns his back as Yabushige begins his seppuku. Then, with respect, Toranaga beheads Yabushige, and his head falls to the ground. Elsewhere, John, out of respect, asks Fuji to allow him to escort her to the convent. Using a small boat, John brings the ashes of her husband and child, hoping she will scatter them into the sea. They sail out together. In the middle of the ocean, Fuji slowly releases the ashes in a quiet ritual. John then drops Mariko's cross into the water to honor everything she did in Japan. In the final moments of episode 10, John and Toranaga's men work together to pull up his sunken ship. In the middle of their hard work, Buntaro suddenly arrives and declares that he is ready to serve alongside them. They all join in. John shouts to raise their spirits, and at last they succeed in lifting the ship back to the surface. From afar, Toranaga watches them silently, holding on to his great dream of rebuilding a peaceful realm in Edo, without war and without bloodshed. This is the end of the series. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you have a movie recommendation for us to discuss.